The deafening crack of a pistol shot split the dawn air as Olivia Palmer's world collapsed around her. She stood frozen on the worn porch of her family's small farmhouse outside San Elizario, Texas, watching helplessly as her father crumpled to his knees before the ruthless debt collector, Vernon Crane. It was 1876, and drought had ravaged their once promising homestead, leaving nothing but dust, debt, and desperation. "Your time's up, Palmer," Crane spat, holstering his still-smoking pistol as Olivia's father clutched his bleeding shoulder. $700 by sundown tomorrow, or I take everything including your daughter's hand from my associate. Tears streamed down Olivia's 21-year-old face as she rushed to her father's side. The blood seeped through his worn cotton shirt, staining her trembling fingers. $700 might as well have been $7,000, an impossible sum for a failing farm with nothing left to sell. "Pa, we'll find a way," she whispered, though her voice betrayed her doubt. Her father's weathered face, lined with years of hardship and recently with illness, contorted in pain. "Livy, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen." Crane mounted his horse with a cruel grin. "Tomorrow at sundown, Palmer, your debt paid in full or your daughter becomes Mrs. Edgar Winters." He tipped his hat mockingly. "I hear he's partial to spirited young women, tries to break them like wild horses." As Crane and his men rode away in a cloud of dust, Olivia helped her father inside. The small farmhouse that had once been filled with her mother's laughter now echoed with emptiness. 3 years since the consumption took her, and now this. "I won't let you marry that man," her father said through gritted teeth as she cleaned his wound. "We'll find another way." But they both knew there was no other way. Their neighbors were suffering the same drought, and the bank had already refused them further credit. By morning, her father's fever had set in infection from the bullet wound, making him delirious. Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, dabbing his forehead with a cool cloth. "Rest, Pa. I'll take care of everything." When sundown came the next day, Vernon Crane returned with Edgar Winters, a man 30 years her senior, with cold eyes and hands that seemed perpetually clenched into fists. Olivia stood on the porch, her meager belongings packed in a single carpet bag, her heart thundering against her ribs. "Where's your pa?" Crane demanded, scanning the property suspiciously. "Too ill to rise," Olivia answered, her chin raised despite her fear. "The infection from your bullet has taken hold." Winters dismounted, eyeing her like cattle at auction. "Pretty enough, I suppose, bit thin. Can you cook, girl?" Olivia bit back a retort. "I can." "Good. My last wife was useless in the kitchen, died last winter." His casual tone sent ice through her veins. "Get in the wagon. We'll be married by the preacher in town before nightfall." "I need to say goodbye to my father," Olivia insisted. Crane sighed dramatically. "Make it quick. And tell him his debt is settled, though I think I got the better end of the bargain." He laughed, and Winters joined in, the sound like gravel in a tin can. Inside, her father reached weakly for her hand. "Livy, don't do this. Run, take the back trail through Henderson's property. Get away from here." Olivia kissed his burning forehead. "And leave you to die alone." "Where would I go, Pa? At least this way you keep the farm. When you're well again, you can come for me." They both knew it was a lie, but it was a comfort they allowed themselves. With one last embrace, Olivia stepped back onto the porch, her face a mask of composure she didn't feel. The journey into San Elizario was silent, save for Winters occasionally barking orders at his driver. The town had once been a place of simple pleasures for Olivia: Saturday markets, occasional dances at the town hall, friendly faces. Now it loomed before her like a prison. As they passed the saloon, a commotion drew her attention. A man was exiting the establishment, tall and broad-shouldered, with a worn leather duster and a Stetson pulled low. She caught only a glimpse of his face, strong-jawed, with eyes the color of a storm cloud before Winters roughly pulled her attention back. Eyes down. Girl. You're to be a married woman within the hour. Inside the small church, the preacher looked between Olivia's pale face and Winters' impatient scowl with obvious concern. "Miss Palmer, are you entering this union of your own free will?" he asked quietly. Before she could answer, Crane cut in. "She's settling her father's debt like a dutiful daughter. Get on with it, preacher. We haven't got all day." The ceremony was a blur. Olivia felt the walls closing in as the preacher spoke words that should have been sacred but now felt like a death sentence. When asked for her consent, she opened her mouth but no sound emerged. The church door slammed open with such force that the hinges groaned in protest. Standing in the doorway, backlit by the setting sun, was the man she'd glimpsed outside the saloon. "I believe the lady hasn't given her answer," he drawled, stepping into the church with the confidence of a mountain lion. "Might want to hold off on pronouncing them man and wife, preacher." Winters turned, his face flushing with anger. "This is a private ceremony, stranger. Get out before I have you thrown out." The man smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "The name's Quinn Blackburn, and I'm not leaving until the lady here confirms she's marrying you of her own free will." Olivia stared at the newcomer, hope and confusion warring within her. Quinn Blackburn looked like many men who passed through San Elizario Trail, worn, dangerous, his gun belt sitting low on his hips. But something in his eyes, a flicker of compassion beneath the hard exterior, made her breath catch. "She's paying off her father's debt," Crane interjected. $700. "Unless you've got that kind of money, Blackburn, I suggest you mind your own business." Quinn's gaze never left Olivia's face. "Is that true, miss? You're marrying this man to settle a debt?" Something in his steady gaze gave her courage. "Yes," she whispered, then stronger. "My father was shot when he couldn't pay. He's ill and Mr. Crane demanded payment by today or we lose everything." Quinn's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then, with deliberate slowness, he reached into his duster and pulled out a leather pouch. The sound of coins hitting the church's wooden floor echoed like thunder. $700, he stated, kicking the pouch toward Crane. "The lady's debt is paid." Crane's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed with suspicion. "What's your game, Blackburn?" "No game," Quinn replied evenly. "Just can't abide seeing a woman forced to marry against her will. The debt's paid. She's free to go." Winters lunged forward, fists clenched. "You can't do this. We had an arrangement." Quinn's hand hovered near his holster. "The arrangement just changed." The preacher, sensing violence brewing, stepped between them. "Gentlemen, please. This is a house of God." Crane bent to count the money, his greedy fingers working quickly. After a moment, he nodded reluctantly. "It's all here." He looked at Olivia with disappointment. "Consider your father's debt settled, Miss Palmer." To Winters, he added, "Come on, Edgar. I'll find you another wife." As they retreated, muttering curses, Olivia found herself alone with Quinn Blackburn and the preacher. Her legs suddenly felt weak with relief, and she sank onto a pew. "Thank you," she breathed, looking up at her unexpected savior. "But why? You don't even know me." Quinn removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. His face, now fully visible, was handsome despite a scar that ran along his left jawline. "Let's just say I've seen what happens to women married off to men like Winters. It never ends well." The preacher excused himself discreetly, leaving them alone in the small church. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the stained glass windows in hues of gold and crimson. "How will I ever repay you?" Olivia asked, the enormity of his gesture overwhelming her. Quinn studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he lowered himself onto one knee before her. "Marry me," he said simply. Olivia gasped, certain she'd misheard. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated. "Not today, not tomorrow, but when you're ready, if you ever are." He held up a hand as she started to protest. "I'm not asking for anything in return except a chance. I've got a ranch about 20 miles north of here. Good land, good water. I can protect you and your father from men like Crane. And if you decide you don't want to marry me, I'll give you the freedom to go wherever you please, with enough money to start over." Olivia stared at him in disbelief. "You're proposing marriage to a complete stranger." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I'm offering you a choice, Miss Palmer, something Winters wasn't doing." He stood, placing his hat back on his head. "Think about it. In the meantime, let's get you back to your father. He'll need a doctor for that wound." Still in shock, Olivia followed him outside where a magnificent black stallion waited. Quinn helped her up, then mounted behind her. As they rode through town, she was acutely aware of his presence, the solid warmth of his chest against her back, the careful way he held the reins to avoid pressing against her. "I don't understand," she said as they left the town behind. $700 is a fortune. Why would you spend it on a stranger?" Quinn was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "I've been riding through these territories for 10 years. Seen a lot of cruelty, especially toward women with few choices. When I saw you in that church." He trailed off, then continued more firmly. "Let's just say I've got the means to help, so I did." When they arrived at her farm, her father had deteriorated further. Quinn carried him to the wagon, then drove them all back to town where the doctor tended to him. The infection was severe, but with proper medicine, rest, and care, he had a chance of recovery. Quinn paid for a room at the hotel for her father's convalescence, brushing aside her protests about adding to her debt. "There is no debt," he insisted. "Only a proposition that you're free to accept or decline." For 3 days, Olivia barely left her father's side as he battled the fever. Quinn came by each evening, bringing food and clean water. He spoke little, but his presence was oddly comforting. On the 4th day, her father finally opened his eyes with clarity, the fever broken. "Livy," he rasped, reaching for her hand. "What happened? Where's Winters?" Through tears of relief, she told him everything, how Quinn had paid their debt and rescued her from the forced marriage. When Quinn visited that evening, her father insisted on speaking with him alone. Olivia paced outside the hotel room, wondering what they were discussing. When Quinn emerged, his expression was solemn. "Your father's a proud man," he said as they walked down the hotel corridor. "He doesn't like being in debt, especially to a stranger." "Neither do I," Olivia admitted, "but I'm grateful, more than I can say." Quinn stopped, turning to face her. "I meant what I said at the church. My offer stands marriage if and when you're ready. But I understand if you need time, or if you'd rather find another way." Olivia studied him in the dim light of the corridor. In 3 days, she'd learned little about Quinn Blackburn except that he was a man of his word, with resources and a quiet strength that intrigued her. Why marriage? Why not simply offer help? His eyes, gray as storm clouds, held her steadily. "Because marriage would give you and your father legal protection. My name, my property, my reputation, all would extend to you. And—" He hesitated, a rare vulnerability crossing his features. "I've been alone a long time. Having someone to build a life with doesn't seem like such a hardship." Before she could respond, the doctor emerged from another room, calling for Quinn's assistance with a patient. With a nod of apology, Quinn left her standing in the corridor, her thoughts in turmoil. That night, she discussed the situation with her father, who was growing stronger by the hour. I don't trust easily after Crane, he said, but Blackburn seems a decent sort. He told me about his ranch, his plans. He's built something substantial out of nothing. He squeezed her hand. But Livy, this has to be your decision. I won't see you forced into another marriage, even one with better prospects. What about the farm? She asked. Our home, her father sighed. The drought's not breaking any time soon. Even with the debt paid, we're one bad season away from ruin. Maybe it's time to consider other paths. A week later, with her father well enough to travel, Quinn invited them to visit his ranch. The journey took most of a day, winding through rugged terrain before opening onto a valley nestled between protective hills. A creek ran through the property, feeding lush pastures where cattle grazed. The ranch house itself was modest but well built, with a wide porch and chimney of native stone. It's beautiful, Olivia breathed as they approached. Quinn's ranch hand, an older man named Hank, greeted them warmly and showed them inside. The house was simple but comfortable: 4 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a sitting room with bookshelves that surprised Olivia with their contents. You read Shakespeare? She asked, noticing a well-worn volume. Quinn looked almost embarrassed. My mother was a school teacher before she married. She taught me to appreciate good writing. Over dinner, prepared by Hank, who proved to be an excellent cook, Olivia learned more about Quinn's past. He'd come west as a boy with his parents, who died of cholera when he was 12. He'd worked cattle drives, saved every penny, and eventually bought this land 5 years ago. Started with 20 head of cattle and this house half built, he explained. Now I've got over 300 head and water rights that'll see us through any drought. You've accomplished a lot for a man so young, her father commented. Quinn, who Olivia guessed to be around 30, shrugged. Been working since I was a boy. Didn't have much choice. After dinner, while her father rested, Quinn showed Olivia the rest of the property: the barn with its sturdy stalls, the corral where several fine horses watched them curiously, the vegetable garden that provided much of their food. You'd have your own room, of course, he said as they walked. Unless you decided otherwise. I meant what I said about choice, Olivia. I won't press you for anything you're not ready to give. They stopped by the creek, where the setting sun turned the water to liquid gold. Olivia had been quiet, absorbing everything, weighing her options, which were few. Return to a failing farm with her still recovering father, seek work in town where opportunities for women were limited, or accept this unexpected offer from a man she barely knew but who had shown her nothing but respect. If I were to accept, she said carefully, I would want to contribute. I'm not looking to be kept like some delicate flower. Quinn's mouth curved into a smile, the first genuine one she'd seen from him. I wouldn't expect anything less. This ranch needs a woman's touch, and I could use a partner, not just a wife. And if it doesn't work, if we find we can't care for each other, his expression sobered. Then you take what you need and go. I meant it about your freedom, Olivia. I won't keep anyone against their will. The sincerity in his voice touched something in her. In a world where women had few choices and fewer protections, his offer was extraordinary. I need time to think, she finally said. To talk with my father. Quinn nodded, respecting her caution. Take all the time you need. They returned to the ranch house in comfortable silence. That night, in the room Quinn had given her, Olivia lay awake for hours. The bed was the softest she'd slept in for years, the sheets clean and smelling of lavender. Outside her window, the vast Texas sky glittered with stars. By morning, her decision was made. Over breakfast, she met Quinn's questioning gaze steadily. Yes, she said simply. I accept your proposal with one condition. Quinn set down his coffee cup. Name it. 1 year. We give this marriage 1 year. If either of us wishes to end it after that time, we do so, no questions asked." He considered this, then nodded slowly. "Agreed. And your father?" "The ranch has plenty of room," she replied. "He can stay with us until he's fully recovered, then decide his own path." Her father, who had been listening quietly, cleared his throat. "Actually, I've been thinking about that. Hank mentioned you need someone to manage the eastern pastures. Said you've been looking to build a second cabin out that way." Quinn looked surprised but pleased. "You'd be interested in that position." "Might do me good to start fresh," her father replied, "if the offer stands." "It does," Quinn confirmed. "Though you'd be working for your son-in-law." For the first time in weeks, her father smiled. "I reckon I can live with that, considering the alternative." 2 days later, they returned to San Elizario for the wedding. It was a simple affair in the same church where they'd first met, though under vastly different circumstances. The preacher, who had witnessed the beginning of their unusual arrangement, seemed pleased to see its continuation. Olivia wore her mother's blue dress, carefully preserved since her passing. Quinn had purchased a new suit for the occasion, the dark material emphasizing the breadth of his shoulders. As they exchanged vows, Olivia searched his face for any sign of regret or hesitation, but found only steady resolve. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher declared. "You may kiss your bride." Quinn hesitated, clearly unsure of her comfort with this tradition. Olivia made the decision for him, rising slightly on her toes to press a gentle kiss to his lips. It was brief, almost chaste, but she felt an unexpected warmth spread through her at the contact. After signing the marriage certificate and receiving congratulations from the few townsfolk who had gathered, they collected their belongings from the hotel and her father's farm. Most of their possessions fit in a single wagon, a humble beginning to their new life together. As they left San Elizario behind, Olivia felt a curious mixture of anxiety and hope. She was leaving the only home she'd ever known, binding herself to a man who was still largely a stranger. Yet something about Quinn Blackburn inspired trust. His quiet strength, his unwavering honesty, the respect with which he treated her, these were not common traits in the men she had known. Their wedding night was not what ballads and penny novels had led Olivia to expect. True to his word, Quinn showed her to her own room, a comfortable chamber adjacent to his own. "The door has a lock," he pointed out. "Though you've no need to use it, I won't enter without invitation." Olivia studied him in the lamplight, this man who was now her husband. "Thank you for everything, Quinn." Not many men would be so patient. A shadow of something, desire, frustration, crossed his features, but his voice remained steady. "Good night, Olivia. Sleep well." The days that followed established a routine. Quinn rose before dawn to work with the cattle, returning for breakfast that Olivia prepared. Her father, growing stronger each day, often accompanied Quinn, learning the operation of the ranch. Olivia took over management of the household, working alongside Hank to ensure everything ran smoothly. She discovered she enjoyed the work. The rhythm of ranch life suited her practical nature. The garden flourished under her care, and she began preserving foods for the coming winter. Quinn had been right. The ranch had needed a woman's touch. She added curtains to the windows, rearranged furniture for better use of space, and found satisfaction in creating a true home. Quinn remained respectful, never pushing for more than she offered. Their conversations over meals grew longer, more comfortable. She learned about his dreams for the ranch, his plans to expand their herd with better bloodlines. He listened attentively when she spoke of her own hopes, perhaps starting a small school for the children of neighboring ranchers, or breeding the fine horses she'd always admired. As spring yielded to summer, Olivia found herself watching Quinn when he wasn't aware the way his hands moved confidently over a horse's flank. The concentration in his eyes as he repaired fencing. The rare smile that transformed his serious face when something amused him. She noticed too how he watched her, his gaze quickly averted when she caught him looking. The change between them happened gradually, like the shifting of seasons. A brush of hands while passing dishes at dinner, standing closer than necessary while checking the garden. Lingering conversations on the porch as the sun set, neither wanting to be the first to say goodnight. One evening, about 2 months after their wedding, a summer thunderstorm rolled in from the west. The rain pounded against the roof, and lightning illuminated the sky in brilliant flashes. Olivia stood on the covered porch, watching nature's display with awe. Quinn joined her, offering a cup of coffee. "Quite a show," he commented, standing close enough that she could feel the heat from his body. "I've always loved storms," she admitted. "The power of them. The way they change everything they touch. Dangerous, though," he said softly, "if you're not careful." She turned to find him watching her, not the storm. The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "Some dangers are worth facing," she heard herself say. For a moment, neither moved. Then Quinn set down his coffee cup and slowly, giving her every chance to retreat, raised his hand to her face. His fingers were calloused from work but gentle as they traced the curve of her cheek. "Olivia," he murmured, her name a question on his lips. In answer, she leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly at the sensation. When she opened them again, his face was closer, his intention clear. This time when they kissed, it was nothing like the brief contact at their wedding. His lips moved against hers with careful exploration, then growing confidence as she responded. Olivia had been kissed before, awkward, fumbling encounters with boys from neighboring farms, but nothing had prepared her for this. Quinn kissed her like a man who had waited too long for something precious, with reverence and restrained passion. When they finally parted, both breathing unsteadily, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since I saw you in that church," he confessed. "Why did you wait so long?" she asked, her hands resting on his chest, feeling the strong beat of his heart. "I needed you to be sure, to choose me, not just the security I could offer." The honesty in his voice touched her deeply. "I am choosing you, Quinn, not just your protection or your ranch. You." That night, for the first time, she did not return to her separate room. Instead, she invited him to hers, nervous but determined. Quinn was patient, gentle, guiding her through unfamiliar intimacy with tender care. In his arms, she discovered parts of herself she hadn't known existed: passion, desire, a capacity for pleasure that left her breathless. Afterward, lying in the circle of his embrace as rain continued to drum on the roof, Olivia felt a sense of rightness she hadn't anticipated. This arrangement, begun as a practical solution to an impossible situation, had somehow transformed into something she hadn't dared hope for: a true marriage, with affection growing toward love. "Are you all right?" Quinn asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. She smiled in the darkness. "More than all right, I'm happy, Quinn, truly happy." His arms tightened around her. "I never expected this," he admitted quietly. "When I saw you in that church, I only knew I couldn't let you be forced into marriage with Winters. I didn't plan to fall in love with you." The word hung between them, new and fragile. Olivia raised herself on one elbow to look at him, finding vulnerability in his expression she'd never seen before. "I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered. It wasn't something she'd planned to say, but as the words left her mouth, she recognized their truth. The summer passed in a haze of work and newfound intimacy. Olivia and Quinn settled into a partnership that extended beyond their growing physical relationship. She learned to ride the ranch with him, helping with cattle when needed. He assisted her in expanding the garden and building a chicken coop. They made decisions together, consulting each other on matters large and small. Her father thrived in his new role, the eastern pasture cabin completed by late summer. He visited regularly, but gave them space to build their life together, a discretion Olivia appreciated. As autumn approached, Olivia began to suspect a change in her condition. The nausea that woke her some mornings, the tenderness in her breasts, the absence of her monthly courses all pointed to the possibility of a child. She kept her suspicions to herself, waiting for certainty before sharing the news with Quinn. Confirmation came from the doctor in a neighboring town, who declared her approximately 3 months along and in excellent health. Riding home, Olivia rehearsed how she would tell Quinn, uncertain of his reaction. They had never discussed children, their focus having been on establishing their marriage. She found him in the barn, brushing down his stallion after a day's ride. The setting sun streamed through the open doors, gilding his profile as he worked, unaware of her presence. The sight of him, this man who had changed her life with an act of compassion, filled her with such overwhelming love that words temporarily failed her. Quinn looked up, noticing her at last. His smile, once rare but now frequent, warmed his entire face. "You're back. How was your visit to town?" Olivia moved closer, suddenly nervous. "Enlightening. I saw the doctor." Alarm replaced his smile as he dropped the brush, crossing to her in 2 long strides. "Are you ill? What's wrong?" She shook her head, taking his hands in hers. "Nothing's wrong. In fact, everything is very right." Taking a deep breath, she looked into his worried eyes. "Quinn, I'm going to have a baby, our baby." For a moment he stood perfectly still, his expression frozen in shock. Then, to her amazement, he let out a whoop of joy that startled the horses. Before she could react, he'd lifted her off her feet, spinning her in a circle before carefully setting her down again. "A baby," he repeated, wonder in his voice. His hand moved tentatively to rest against her still flat stomach. "When?" "Early spring, the doctor thinks. Around April." Quinn's eyes, usually so controlled, shone with emotion. "Are you happy about this, Olivia?" "Truly, I am," she assured him, covering his hand with her own. "I hadn't planned it so soon, but now that I know, I can't imagine wanting anything more." That night, lying in bed with her head on his chest, Olivia listened to Quinn making plans, adjustments to the house, a cradle he would build, how they would need to hire more help so she wouldn't overwork herself. "Slow down," she laughed, pressing a kiss to his jaw. "We have months yet." He captured her hand, bringing it to his lips. "I never thought I'd have this," he confessed. "A wife, a child on the way. After my parents died, I was alone for so long. I'd convinced myself that was my path. And now," his arms tightened around her, "now I can't imagine any other life than this one with you." The months of Olivia's pregnancy passed with surprising swiftness. Quinn proved to be attentive to her every need, sometimes frustratingly so. She had to remind him frequently that pregnancy wasn't an illness, and that the women of the frontier had been bearing children while continuing their work for generations. Nevertheless, she appreciated his concern, especially as her body changed and certain tasks became more difficult. Quinn hired a young widow from town, Rosa, to help with household duties 3 times a week. Olivia initially resisted but soon welcomed the assistance and female companionship. As her belly grew, so did their anticipation. They prepared a nursery in the room adjacent to theirs, Quinn crafting a beautiful cradle from cedar wood. Olivia sewed tiny garments in the evenings, while Quinn read aloud from his collection of books. Their conversations often turned to names, debating family traditions and personal preferences. Winter settled over the ranch, bringing crisp days and cold nights. The cattle were moved to sheltered pastures, and preparations for spring calving began. Despite her advancing pregnancy, Olivia insisted on maintaining her involvement in ranch operations, though she conceded to doing so from horseback less often. December brought a letter that disrupted their peaceful existence. Quinn returned from town with news that Vernon Crane had been killed in a dispute over gambling debts. "Good riddance," her father declared when they shared the news during his weekly visit. "That man brought nothing but misery to this county." Olivia couldn't disagree, though she felt a strange pang at the news. Had it not been for Crane's cruelty, she might never have met Quinn. The thought of a life without him, without their child growing within her, was now unimaginable. "There's something else," Quinn said, his expression serious. "Edgar Winters was involved in the dispute. He's been asking questions about us in town." A chill ran through Olivia that had nothing to do with the winter air. "Why? Surely he's forgotten about me by now." Quinn's jaw tightened. "Apparently not. According to Hank, who heard it from the barber, Winters believes I cheated him out of what was rightfully his." "You paid Crane fair and square," her father protested. "The debt was settled." "Men like Winters don't see it that way," Quinn replied. "They believe they're entitled to whatever they want." He turned to Olivia, his expression softening with concern. "I don't want you going to town alone until this blows over. Winters has a reputation for holding grudges." Though she chafed at the restriction, Olivia agreed. With her child's birth only months away, she had no intention of taking unnecessary risks. January brought heavy snow that isolated the ranch for weeks. February passed in a similar fashion, the world outside their windows a pristine white. By March, the snow began to melt, revealing the first hints of green beneath. As the land awakened from winter, Olivia felt her body preparing for the imminent arrival of their child. The first pains began at dawn on a clear April morning. Quinn had just left for the south pasture when Olivia felt the sharp contraction. Rosa, who had stayed overnight due to Olivia's increasing discomfort, immediately sent Hank to fetch Quinn and the midwife from town. The hours that followed tested Olivia's strength and resolve. The midwife arrived by mid-morning, her experienced hands checking the baby's position and Olivia's progress. Quinn paced outside the bedroom door until Rosa finally took pity and invited him in. The sight of Olivia's pain clearly terrified him, but he mastered his fear, kneeling beside the bed to hold her hand and wipe her brow. His steady presence became her anchor as the labor intensified. "You're the strongest person I've ever known," he murmured during a brief respite between contractions. "I love you, Olivia, more than I ever thought possible." As the sun began to set, the midwife announced it was time. With Quinn supporting her back and whispering encouragement, Olivia gathered her remaining strength for the final push. The room filled with the lusty cry of their newborn son, a sound so perfect it brought tears to both their eyes. "A fine, healthy boy," the midwife declared, placing the swaddled infant in Olivia's arms after cleaning and examining him. Olivia gazed down at their son's tiny face, overcome with love so intense it left her breathless. Quinn sat beside her on the bed, one arm around her shoulders, his other hand gently touching the baby's cheek. "He's perfect," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Just like his mother." They named him Samuel after Quinn's father. With his shock of dark hair and gray eyes, he resembled Quinn strongly, though Olivia insisted his mouth and chin were hers. Her father, upon meeting his grandson the next day, declared him the finest baby ever born in the territory, a statement he made with such conviction that none dared dispute it. The weeks following Samuel's birth were a blur of adjustment and joy. Quinn proved to be a devoted father, often carrying the baby against his chest in a sling Rosa had fashioned while he handled ranch business nearby. Olivia recovered quickly, eager to settle into their new routine as a family of three. It was during this peaceful time that trouble finally found them. Quinn had ridden to the eastern pasture to check on a breach in the fence reported by one of the hands. Olivia was hanging laundry in the yard, Samuel sleeping in a basket nearby, when she heard the approach of horses. 3 riders appeared on the ridge above the ranch house. Even at a distance, she recognized the central figure, Edgar Winters, his bulky frame unmistakable. With him were 2 men she didn't know, rough-looking characters whose appearance sent a spike of fear through her. Grabbing Samuel, Olivia hurried inside, her heart pounding. Hank was in town for supplies and Rosa had left after breakfast. She was alone with her infant son and 3 men who clearly meant no good. As the riders approached the house, Olivia retrieved Quinn's spare revolver from the bedroom drawer. She'd learned to shoot years ago, necessity on the frontier making it a valuable skill for women as well as men. With Samuel securely swaddled in his cradle, she positioned herself by the window, watching as Winters and his companions dismounted. "Mrs. Blackburn," Winters called, his voice carrying easily to where she stood. "I believe we have unfinished business." Olivia remained silent, her grip tightening on the revolver. "I know you're in there, girl," he continued. "Your husband's horse is gone, and that old hand of yours is in town. It's just us now." One of his companions laughed, the sound ugly and threatening. "Come on out, pretty lady. We just want to talk." "I have nothing to say to you," Olivia finally called, keeping her voice steady despite her fear. "My husband paid my father's debt in full. There is no unfinished business." Winters spat on the ground. "That debt was meant to be paid with you, not coin. Your husband stole what was mine." "I was never yours," Olivia replied, anger overriding fear. "Leave now before Quinn returns." The 3rd man, who had been silent until now, drew his pistol. "We ain't afraid of your husband, lady. 3 against 1 ain't bad odds." Samuel began to fuss, perhaps sensing her distress. Olivia moved to the cradle, keeping the revolver ready while trying to soothe him. The small sound was enough to catch Winters' attention. "Is that a baby I hear?" he called, a new note of malice in his voice. "Well now, that changes things. Blackburn's got himself a family to protect. Makes a man vulnerable." The transparent threat to her child sent a wave of fury through Olivia. Moving back to the window, she raised the revolver and fired a warning shot that sent Winters' hat flying from his head. "The next one won't miss," she called out, her voice like steel. "I've been shooting since I was 12, and I'm a damn sight better than most men in this county." Winters and his men had ducked at the shot, clearly not expecting resistance. They exchanged glances, recalculating their approach. Olivia knew she had momentarily surprised them, but 3 armed men against 1 woman with a baby wouldn't hesitate long. As if in answer to her silent prayer, she heard the distant sound of hoofbeats, multiple riders approaching fast. Winters heard it too, his head turning toward the sound. "Seems my husband isn't as far away as you thought," Olivia called, relief making her voice stronger. "And he doesn't ride alone." Quinn appeared on the ridge, but he wasn't alone. Her father rode beside him along with 3 ranch hands. All were armed, rifles at the ready. "Winters." Quinn's voice carried across the distance, cold with controlled fury. "You're trespassing on my land and threatening my family. Give me one good reason not to shoot you where you stand." Winters' companions were already backing toward their horses, their enthusiasm for confrontation clearly diminished by the arrival of armed opposition. Winters himself stood his ground, though Olivia could see the calculation in his expression. "This isn't over, Blackburn," he shouted. "A man has a right to what's his." "I was never yours to claim," Olivia called back, emboldened by Quinn's presence. "And if you ever come near my family again, I'll shoot you myself." The conviction in her voice must have registered, because Winters finally backed down. Mounting his horse, he spat one final threat. "Watch your back, both of you. I don't forget debts." As Winters and his men rode away, Quinn and the others thundered into the yard. Quinn was off his horse before it had fully stopped, rushing to the house with fear evident in every line of his body. Olivia met him at the door, Samuel in one arm, the revolver still in her other hand. Quinn pulled them both into a fierce embrace, his heart hammering against her cheek. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" he demanded, his eyes scanning her for any sign of injury. "We're fine," she assured him, leaning into his strength. "They never got close enough to try anything." Her father approached, his lined face tight with anger. "I heard Winters was asking about the ranch in town. When Quinn came to check the fence, I told him my suspicions." He placed a gentle hand on Samuel's head. "Thank God we got here in time." That night, after the excitement had died down and Samuel was peacefully asleep in his cradle, Quinn and Olivia sat on the porch, his arm tight around her shoulders. "I've never been so scared," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "When I saw their horses at the house." Olivia pressed closer to his side. "I was frightened too, but mostly I was angry. How dare they threaten our home, our child?" Quinn turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I'm proud of you, Olivia. Not many would have had the courage to stand their ground against 3 armed men." "I had something worth protecting," she said simply. His expression grew serious. "Winters won't give up easily. Men like him can't stand losing, especially to someone they consider beneath them." "What will we do?" Quinn was quiet for a moment, considering their options. "We have choices. We could sell the ranch, move somewhere Winters can't find us, or we can stay and face whatever comes." Olivia didn't hesitate. "This is our home, Quinn, Samuel's home. I won't be driven from it by fear." A slow smile spread across his face. "I was hoping you'd say that." He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "We'll increase security. No one rides alone. The hands will take shifts watching the property." "And Winters?" Quinn's expression hardened. "I'll speak with the sheriff tomorrow, file a formal complaint about the trespass and threats. Winters doesn't have the influence he once did, not since Crane's death. The law may be on our side this time." True to his word, Quinn rode to town the next day, returning with news that the sheriff had agreed to visit Winters with a warning. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Life on the ranch settled into a new pattern, more vigilant but determined not to be ruled by fear. Samuel grew rapidly, a happy baby whose laugh became Quinn and Olivia's favorite sound. By summer, he was attempting to crawl, his determination matching his father's in a way that made Olivia smile. The final confrontation with Winters came on a hot July day, nearly 3 months after his initial threat. Quinn and Olivia had ridden to town together, Samuel securely nestled in a sling against her chest. They were purchasing supplies when Winters entered the general store, clearly drunk despite the early hour, his bleary eyes focused on them with malevolent recognition. "Well, if it isn't the happy family," he slurred, blocking the doorway. "Enjoying what should have been mine, Blackburn." Quinn moved subtly, positioning himself between Winters and Olivia. "You're drunk, Winters. Go home before you do something you'll regret." Winters laughed, an ugly sound. "Only thing I regret is not taking what was mine when I had the chance." His hand moved toward his holster. What happened next occurred so quickly that later, when Olivia tried to recount it, she found the sequence blurred. Quinn lunged forward just as Winters drew his pistol. There was a struggle, a single gunshot that seemed to echo forever in the confined space of the store. When the chaos cleared, Winters lay on the floor, a spreading stain of red on his shirt. The gun that had fired was his own, discharged during the struggle. The sheriff, who had been across the street, came running at the sound of the shot. After interviewing witnesses and examining the scene, he declared it self-defense Winters had drawn first, with clear intent to harm. As they rode home that evening, Samuel sleeping peacefully against Olivia's chest, she felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. A man had died, however deserving of his fate, yet his death meant their family could finally live without the shadow of his threats. "Are you all right?" Quinn asked, noticing her quiet mood. Olivia considered the question carefully. "I think so. It seems such a waste. All that hatred, and for what? A debt that was paid, a woman who never wanted him." Quinn reached across to take her hand. "Some men can't accept when something isn't theirs to take. His choices led him to that moment, not ours." She nodded, knowing he was right. "I'm ready for our life to be about more than just surviving threats. I want to build something lasting, Quinn. For us, for Samuel." His smile, warm in the golden light of the setting sun, eased the last of her tension. "We will, starting tomorrow." True to his word, the following years brought growth and prosperity to their ranch. Quinn expanded their herd, breeding finer cattle that commanded premium prices. Olivia started a small school on the property, teaching the children of their hands and neighboring ranches. Samuel grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's thoughtful nature and his mother's determination. When Samuel was 3, a daughter joined their family, Elizabeth, named for Olivia's mother. She arrived with less drama than her brother but equal joy, completing their family in a way that made Olivia's heart full to bursting. On the 5th anniversary of their unusual wedding, Quinn surprised Olivia with a gift, the deed to her father's old farm, which he had purchased and restored. Though her father was content in his cabin on the eastern pasture, the gesture touched Olivia deeply. "It's part of your history," Quinn explained as they stood on the hill overlooking both properties. "I wanted it preserved for our children, so they'll know where their mother came from." Olivia leaned against him, watching Samuel chase butterflies while Elizabeth slept in her father's arms. "When you paid my debt that day in the church, did you ever imagine this?" she asked, gesturing to the life they'd built. Quinn's free arm tightened around her waist. "I hoped," he admitted. "But the reality has surpassed anything I could have imagined." As the sun set on their land, painting the Texas sky in shades of gold and crimson, Olivia reflected on the strange path that had led her here. A debt, a desperate situation, and a stranger's unexpected kindness all had combined to give her a life richer than she could have dreamed. "I love you, Quinn Blackburn," she said, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. "Thank you for giving me the choice that day, for offering freedom and finding love instead." His smile, once rare but now a familiar treasure, warmed her heart as it had from the beginning. "Best bargain I ever made," he murmured against her lips. "And I'd make it again, 1,000 times over." Hand in hand, they walked home as the first stars appeared above. Their children secure in their arms and their future stretching before them like the vast Texas horizon, boundless with possibility and rich with promise. 10 years later, the Blackburn Ranch had grown into one of the most prosperous in the county. Quinn's innovative breeding programs had resulted in hardier cattle that thrived in the Texas climate, while Olivia's school had expanded to a proper building with 2 additional teachers. Samuel, now 13, was his father's shadow, learning every aspect of ranch management with keen intelligence. Elizabeth, 10, had inherited her mother's love of books and teaching, often helping with the youngest students at the school. On a warm spring evening, as the family gathered on the porch after dinner, Quinn shared news that would shape their future once again. "The railroad's coming through," he announced, his expression thoughtful. "They've offered to buy part of our eastern land for the track and a small station." Olivia considered this development. The railroad would bring new opportunities, easier shipping for their cattle, access to markets previously too distant, growth for the nearby town. "What do you think?" she asked, trusting his judgment as she had for years. Quinn smiled, still captivated by his wife's beauty after all this time. "I think it's time for a new chapter. The children are growing, the ranch is established. We could do more, be more." Samuel looked up eagerly. "Does that mean we'll ship our cattle all the way to Chicago, Pa?" "It might," Quinn answered. "And your mother's school could become something bigger, perhaps even a proper academy someday." Olivia's eyes brightened at the possibility. "With a library, real science equipment." "Whatever you wish," he promised. "We've built something strong here, all of us together. Now we can build it higher." As the sun set on their land, Olivia reflected on how far they had come from that desperate day in the church. A debt paid, a marriage offered as freedom, and love that had grown deeper with each passing year. It was a story she would tell their grandchildren someday, a legacy of choosing courage over fear, possibility over limitation. Quinn's arm settled around her shoulders, a familiar comfort that still made her heart quicken after all these years. Together they watched their children chase fireflies in the gathering dusk, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze the sweetest music of a life well lived and richly loved. The debt that had once threatened to destroy her had instead led Olivia to her greatest treasure, not the land or prosperity, but the family they had created together. In Quinn's offer of freedom, she had found the truest liberation of all, the freedom to love completely, to build fearlessly, to become fully herself within the circle of his unwavering devotion. It was, she thought as she leaned into her husband's embrace, a debt that had been repaid 1,000-fold in joy.